And Steve says, no, not Bruce. He says, check this out, check this out. So Bruce listened to the mixes. He goes, oh, he says, we found our mixer. So basically over a weekend, I went from being the assistant engineer to the guy mixing the record. And that was the big break in my career. Like, to have Steven and Joe stamp of approval on things along with Bruce Fairbairn was just like, wow. And my life changed after that. I thought, well, maybe if I get a job at a studio or something, right? So I called a couple of studios, and one of them got back to me and said, hey, we're not hiring, but we need a janitor. So I said, yep. Got the foot in the door as a janitor. And to be honest, I was a shitty janitor. So it was a good song, but it wasn't, there's no way I had any inclination that it would be the anthem that it is today. Like, it is everywhere, every sports stadium. He had erased a bunch of John's guitars to get his vocals on, and John goes, well, we spent days doing that. He goes, oh, well, sorry, but you're just gonna have to redo them. So that started the big fight. The first night Stephen and Joe walked in, they walked by the control room window in their long duster coats, and Bob and I look at each other and like, oh my God, it's actually Aerosmith in the building. That was a tough one, especially producing Jimmy Page. It's like, yeah, right.
Did you ever get done with a record and go, shit, I should have done something different?
Every single one of them.
You just go with it and go, yeah, shit. That wouldn't have done anything if I hadn't worked on that.
Remember when I told you how to sing, whoa?
The hair metal guru from Warren to Crew. The hair metal guru. Never forget Charlie too.
Hey, today I'm pumped to sit down with legendary Canadian producer, engineer, and mixer Mike Fraser, whose work defined the sound of rock and hard rock in the late 80s and early 90s, from engineering Aerosmith's Pump album to mixing AC/DC's The Razor's Edge to working with Poison, The Cult, and Metallica. Mike's touch has left a huge mark on music history. And with that, Mike Fraser, welcome to the show.
Hey, man. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I wore my AC/DC shirt because you have such a important part of the AC/DC history. So
I wore mine too, but the AC/DC wore off.
Hey, you know what? Yeah, the older we get, some of these shirts just don't hold together like this.
I know, man.
So hey, and I was actually gonna say, you actually mixed my favorite song of the last year, and it's by a band called The Wild, and a song called Gasoline. And I think that was 2020. Anyway, somebody introduced me to that album recently. It's called Still Believe in Rock and Roll, and that song just grabbed me. So anyway, I just wanted to you to know that.
I had tears mixing that song. There's so many great moments in that song, and
it just goosebumps inducing, like one of the most emotional. Anyway, so kudos to you for doing that. And
Thanks,
I want to get into what you've got going on now. But you're from Canada, and you end up producing or working at like the record studio of the 80s. How do you get your start in music? And maybe even go back to the beginning, like when do you know, like, hey, I want to make music the thing that I do?
Well, really briefly, I was in a garage band in high school, played guitar, learned very quickly I wasn't going to make any money playing guitar. So that lasted a little bit. I quit school. School wasn't for me. My dad and I had a heavy duty equipment company. We did logging. I drove trucks, etc. Got shut down in the winter just because you just couldn't work in the winter, and I got bored of doing that. So I thought, well, I need to be in music. Music just So I thought, well, maybe if I get a job at a studio or something, right? So I called a couple of studios, and one of them got back to me and said, hey, we're not hiring, but we need a janitor. So I said, yep. Got the foot in the door as a janitor, and started there, and just sort of did all my training was sort of school of hard knocks, and it just got super lucky. All the great people that worked there, Bob Rock, pretty big producer, engineer guy, Bruce Fairbairn. So Bob and Bruce and I sort of became a team. I was Bob's assistant. we did all these records, started with a band called Prism, Canadian band. Loverboy sort of kicked it off for Canada because they had a lot of success down in the States. That sort of drew in Bon Jovi and the Aerosmiths and
Yeah.
ACD. So it just sort of snowballed from there. But, super lucky, got super lucky, and, just worked hard to put myself in a position to be able to go with that luck.
Sure. So what what when you're a janitor, what do you do that leads somebody to say, "Hey, maybe you can help out more"?
Well, I guess because I was willing to just work for it. I'm there at 4 in the morning, flipping the mints in the toilets and and sweeping up. And to be honest, I was a shitty janitor, so that didn't sort of hold my job as a janitor long. And at the time, the studio there in Vancouver, Little Mountain Sound, was primarily a jingle company. So they would, be recording all the jingles and stuff for nationwide airplay and all that kind of stuff. So I was an assistant to that. And they shut the doors at 5, 6 p.m. So Bob Rock had just started as an engineer, was doing all the local sort of punk bands, and he says, "Oh," I said, "Do you mind if I come in and hang out with you?" He says, "Yeah, do what you want." So I'd work with Bob from 5 till 1, 2 in the morning, and then start my janitor again at 4 a.m. So then I got a sleeping bag, lived at the studio for a year and a half. So I think it was just my work ethic, and just it just draws people in. They trust you. There's, oh, Michael show up on the job, Michael do the job. So it just snowballed from there, really.
So you mentioned Bob Rock and Bruce Fairbairn, who
Yeah.
are like legendary in rock circles. Like, how does your relationship develop with them? And can you just briefly describe those guys and how you end up forming this bond with them?
Well, again, we're all there at the right place at the right time with enough want to do better all the time. In Canada here, we always struggled with our big brothers down south for airplay and bands and everything. So we had to work really hard, and it was funny over the years, with Bob and I doing records together. Little Mountain wasn't really that special a studio. We didn't have like a lot of great gear, so we were trying to do these records. It wasn't until we started sort of traveling to LA or New York or something, and we see what these studios have gear wise. Like, oh, that's why that record sounds like that. So we had to really try hard to try and emulate what was going on without knowing what was going on. So I think just that work ethic between the three of us. I mean, Bruce was brilliant. Bob is amazing, talented guy, and we just hit a right niche at the right time, and it just exploded. I mean, literally exploded. It was crazy.
So what and you mentioned Loverboy. Loverboy kind of opens the gates.
Yeah.
What were you doing on those Loverboy projects? Like, what was your role?
Well, I was assistant to Bob, so I was out, setting up the microphones, tearing this down, doing that. Back in the day, this was before any sort of computers.
Yeah.
All the mixing was manual, so there was, we'd get a whole bunch of us in the studio. Mostly it was me and Bob and Bruce, but sometimes the band guys, and we'd all have our hands over each other, and we'd manually mix the song, and it was kind of, you would sort of rehearse it for a few hours, and then you'd print it to tape, and then that was the mix. So it was just everybody had input, and it was a performance kind of, and you got the performance, and that was
Sure.
the fun part of it. It was a lot of work, but it was a lot of fun.
Sure. So when Loverboy started blowing up, were you guys like, holy shit, like this is gonna happen for us?
Yeah, yeah, man. I mean, I used to get excited, working on a jingle, and then the next morning hear it on the radio. Oh, hey, I worked on that. But nothing compared to when all of a sudden Loverboy started blowing up, and especially getting added to all the American airplay and stuff, which was really impossible for Canadian bands. I mean, most people didn't want to know about Canadian bands down there, and to have that happen and watch them climb up the Billboard charts, it was just like it were pinching, like, wow, that's great.
Yeah.
My first gold record was a Loverboy record, like that was like, wow.
Right. So it seems like if I research and I watch some of your interviews, I've poured over your website, like it seems like Permanent Vacation from Aerosmith is maybe where you kind of get your first big break. Could you kind of talk about that album and your involvement in it?
Well, on that record, I was still Bob, Bruce, and I were still the team. I was still Bob's assistant,
Yep.
and we started. The band showed up into town, which is amazing. I've always been an Aerosmith fan, so see the first night Stephen and Joe walked in. They walked by the control room window in their long duster coats, and Bob and I look at each other and like, oh my god, it's actually Aerosmith in the building.
Yeah.
So we started doing the basic tracking, which is you basically record the bass and drums and some basic rhythm guitars. Steven always sang along, rough vocals to all the things. So we started recording. We're about a week into it. At the time, Bob Rock was in a band called the Paolas, and
Okay.
they were starting to get some success. So all of a sudden, they had a cross Canada tour booked for 6 weeks. He says, "Hey, Bruce," he says, "I can't finish recording the record." Bruce says, "Well, that's no problem. Mike can do it. We'll get Mike to do it." So we spent the next probably 4 weeks or so recording the record. And at the end of it, Bruce had to go away on business for 3 days. He says, "Okay, well," he says, "tell you what, can you do rough mixes of all the songs and we'll send out packages out and we'll try and, find somebody to mix the record for us." I said, "Yeah, no problem." So I started doing the mix first weekend. Stephen and Joe walked in to check it out, and they both looked at me and says, "You're not into this, are you?" And my heart just dropped. I thought, oh, they hate it. And they said, "No, no, you don't want to rough mix this. You want to mix this." They said, "Go for it." So over the next 3 days, we mixed 3 songs. So when Bruce came back, he was pissed because I didn't get my job done. And Steve says, "No, not Bruce." He says, "Check this out, check this out." So Bruce listened to the mixes. He goes, "Oh," he says, "we found our mixer." So basically, over a weekend, I went from being the assistant engineer to the guy mixing the record. And that was the big, big break in my career. To have Stephen and Joe stamp of approval on things along with Bruce Fairburn was just like, wow. And my life changed after that. It was
Sure.
amazing.
Do you
Yeah.
remember do you remember what was the first song that made Steven and Joe go, okay, shit?
I I did.
Yeah, that's okay if you don't.
Trying to think about it right now. St. John.
Okay.
St. John
Okay.
was the first one. Yeah.
Okay. So like Aerosmith, obviously they were one of the biggest bands in the world in the 70s, but by Permanent Vacation, and I think this was the first record that they did sober.
I think they were 6 months sober at the time, and they were like kids in the candy store. I think Joe and Stephen had both said to me, "This is the first time we remember doing a record. All our
Right.
other records, they're so out of it. Somebody would just sort of put headphones on. Okay, when you hear music, play."
Yeah.
And so they would never really know what was on the record till they get the finished thing back. I mean, they did, but
Yeah.
this is the first time they were clear-headed and sober, and they're so excited and like kids at the candy store. I mean, that record was so much fun to do because of their energy, and they're like, "Oh, and this, oh, that sounds great," and like, "Hey, let's try this." And Bruce was great at being very organized and very kind of keeping things. And he go, "Okay, guys, okay, let's just get this done, and then we can do that."
Right.
He kept trying to not
Right.
pull them back, but corral them.
Wait, is there any sort of like stress? And I say that because like their early 80s albums, even if they're good, they weren't it's not like they were selling, mass, they weren't going platinum anymore. So is there any kind of like shit, guys, we better get this right, or anything like that?
I think so, and I think there's a lot of pressure on it because it was sort of their new debut record kind of thing. Bruce was he was a musician himself, so he was very sort of song orientated.
Yeah.
A lot of that was sort of done beforehand and behind the scenes from my awareness, but I
Sure.
know, they got in guys like Jim Valance, who worked with Brian Adams, and Jim Valance co-wrote a lot of Brian's songs. Jim's a great songwriter,
Yeah.
so they brought Jim in to write some songs. They worked very close with a guy named John Kolodner at the label
The
that were
A&R rep.
song, yeah, just so very song orientated. So they made sure that there was the songs. And back in those days, you tried to have at least two or three sort of singles
Yeah.
to anchor the record, and then the other stuff, not that was filler, but it could flesh out the album and do what the band wanted to do. But if as long as you had these three sort of radio songs, you were good to go. So a lot of focus was done on that as well. And I think it was probably before we got to the studio. You know, in the studio, Bruce didn't like too much writing going on because it just really slows things down. When he's in the studio, he just likes to let's go, 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 let's get it done and all that stuff. But I think there was a focus on that. They knew this was going to be their, you know, maybe last chance at grabbing the brass ring or something like that. But, you know, they're now sober. They've got energy. Let's get the songs behind us. We've got a good team behind us. Okay, let's go for this. And that's sort of the feeling when we went in to do that record.
Were they pretty involved in like when you were mixing, or do they kind of just like, are they hands off, or are they like watching every little thing that you're doing?
Well, when I'm mixing, and especially, you know, in latter years and nowadays, I do it pretty much on my own. But back in those days, you know, Bruce would let me have my few hours or whatever it does, get things together, get all balanced. But because, you know, a lot of it's manual moves, there's no automation yet at this point. The band would come in, you know, at that point, I think it was Bruce and I and my assistant would do a lot of the moves. The band come in at the end and say, okay, well, hey, Joe, while you're there, turn on your guitar at 2 minutes and 15 minutes. And Joe, Stephen, can you bump that fader? You know, so there's a little bit of that, not too much because the band's not always there. So if you have to reprint the mix later, you're like, oh, okay. So yeah, but they're very much, and they'd come in, you know, towards the end, listen to the mix, go, yeah, that's great. Or can we have a little bit more vocal? Or, you know, they do their input. It wasn't just like we'd just do the mix, say, here's your mix, we're done, you know?
Sure. And this would be the last thing on this album, but Desmond Child did some writing. You said Jim Vallance, and you know, it would later come out that Joe Perry was like, you know, he didn't know how he felt about outside writers coming in. The song Angel was kind of a point of contention. It was the big power ballad. And maybe you didn't witness any of this, but were you ever any part of like hearing like, oh man, I don't know about this direction, or do you remember?
Oh, of course, because, you know, bands like that and artists in bands like that are, you know, are really good songwriters in their own right. So when you write a song, it's your child, it's your baby, and to have somebody go, yeah, no, that arm looks a bit deformed, and I don't like the face, and can we get somebody in to fix this? And hey, we need to write some more song. It's kind of a hurt to the ego, so it's really hard with a lot of artists to rein their egos in a bit. Not saying they're egotistical by any, but you know, that's what they do. This is our thing. And you don't like my song, but you know, I'm an Aerosmith. So sometimes you just need help to get across different genres, you know, different fan bases and all that kind of stuff. So it's a tough bridge to cross, and great bands cross that bridge just to have it. Hey, we need a little help, you know, and yeah, it's a hard pill to swallow, but they were all gracious enough to go, okay, Bruce, okay, Mr. Kolodner, we trust you, let's do this. And you know, and then they're happy they did, but they're sometimes a bit of a fight for sure.
Do you remember when you knew, holy shit, this album is gonna break big?
I never know. And now later on, I look back on things, and sometimes the only way I know that the song is going to be huge is because I don't like it. I've always been a B-side guy, side two guy. I like all the deep cuts, and that's right. And then all sort of the radio hits. I'm like, okay, well, that's all right, you know. So, like "Lovin' an Elevator" wasn't like one of my favorite songs, but whoa, away that one went.
Bruce produced "Slippery When Wet" from Bon Jovi, right? Yes, were you involved in that? Because when I look at your history, I don't see anything, but I just figured I'd ask because Bruce did that album.
Yeah, no, I wasn't. I know I was in the other side. Little Mountain had two studios, A and B, and I was in Studio B, and I can't remember what band or bands I was
Sure.
doing, but Bob and Bruce were in the other side doing Slippery. So I hung out a lot with the guys and all that. And to this day, John Bon Jovi thinks I worked on that record.
Oh,
Every
no
time
way.
until he goes, "Oh, Frank, yeah, I remember doing that record with you, man. That was such a fun record. Thanks for like,
Yeah.
yeah, there, John. But yeah, thanks.
You just go with it and go, yeah, shit. That
Yeah,
band wouldn't have
sure.
done anything if I hadn't
Yeah.
worked on that.
Remember when I told you how to sing? Whoa!
Right. And so in shit, you did a lot of stuff in 87. In 87, you mixed the Loverboy Wildside record. And here's why I bring that up. It's because they had that huge run. But in 87, it's like the tides are changing from Night Ranger and Loverboy to Bon Jovi and Poison and Cinderella. So was there a concern and was there a conscious effort, maybe even in your role in mixing it, in trying to make it more modern or to fit in with those bands?
I think the biggest thing from what I remember was, Bob wasn't available. Who's the next guy? And I had, at that point, got a bit of a track record. So Paul Dean and Mike Reno had come to me and said, "Hey, so we got the song. We need the song mixed.
Yeah.
Hey, and I said, "Of course." Like, I think by then we'd done three records. Well, definitely two, but maybe three records together. So we're all like brothers. Well, even to this day, we're still like brothers,
Yeah.
golf with Mike a lot. But, I
Awesome.
said, "Oh, of course. Yeah, I'd love to do that." And then I thought, while I was doing it, I remember because I was definitely just the assistant on all the Loverboy stuff. And wow, this is a great sort of turn of events that now I'm mixing their record. And that was sort of the little green,
Right.
greenhorn
Right.
assistant on all the big ones. So yeah, it was fun.
Yeah. And this is, I just found this out because I was watching an interview, but I hadn't known that you worked on the 1987 Whitesnake album.
Yes,
And
yes.
that's your first meeting John Sykes, and you'll end up doing, but there's kind of a lot of controversy about that album. Like Coverdale had vocal problems, Sykes gets fired afterwards, and I just can you kind of tell us your experiences of that album and seeing that project come through?
Yeah, yeah. That one, a guy named Mike Stone was producing it. Now, Mike worked a lot with Roy Thomas Baker on a lot of the Queen stuff, and he had some great stories of the Queen sessions. But anyways, they had come in, and Mike was an English from England, English producer, and their idea of an assistant was called the tape op. Well, the tape op ran the tape machine, so the multi-track tape machine. So my job on that record was to punch in and out of drums, which is virtually impossible without leaving a little blip or a gap. But we had to do it because so that was sort of my introduction to like, holy crap, I got to get my shit together.
Yeah.
While we're doing that record, we were having some trouble getting a guitar sound or whatever. And John had heard about Bob Rock. I can't remember what Bob was doing at that time. And he said, "Hey, can Bob come over?" Because Bob's a guitar player. And he came over and tweaked a few things on the amp and got this great sound. And away we did. So we did the record, finished it off. David was having problems singing in Vancouver. And I can't remember what time of year, but it was maybe the weather. And he had a cold and I can't sing. And he says, "Okay, well, tell you what," he says, "I'm going to go back to my place in Miami and get rid of this cold." And then he says, "Just send me the tapes and I'll sing down there." So while we're finishing the overdubs and guitar solos and stuff, we would send David the tapes. And these are, 24 track tapes. So we'd send him the tapes. So he'd do his vocals and he'd send us the tape back. But because you're limited to tracks, he had erased a bunch of John's guitars to get his vocals on. And John goes, "Well, we spent days doing that." And he goes, "Oh, well, sorry, but you're just going to have to redo them." So that started the big fight. And John says, "I've already done it. I'm not redoing these again. You can't do that." And, again, I'm not privy to a lot of the phone calls and
Of course.
conversations. That kind of what started it. And whether John was fired or quit or whatever, it's
Yeah.
probably the same thing. They were just done with each other because you can't do this. So I know at the end the tapes all got sent to David once John was done all the stuff. So I think that's why some other guitar players are credited with solos and all that kind of stuff. But
Right.
you know, John was one of the big writers on that record.
Yeah.
He played pretty much everything on that record. So uh, yeah, it was unfortunate, but that started the Blue Murder thing.
Right. Um,
So
I probably don't know the terminology, but did John Sykes do the scratch vocals or whatever the vocals that ended up, at like, hey, here's how it might go in the studio when David was gone, or did any, or
no, no.
okay,
At that point, John didn't pretend or whatever to be a singer. He was just
sure,
strictly doing guitar stuff and
sure.
writing stuff. And yeah,
Okay. Okay. Awesome. So, and then we'll get into, so in 89, you get called back. Obviously, Aerosmith is going to try to, make it all happen again. You get to do the Pump album. And
yeah.
and was there, and you kind of said like there was maybe a little, there's obviously pressure. Was it different going back to Aerosmith after Permanent Vacation blew up on the Pump album?
The only difference I perceived was now we're later on down the road. The band isn't so, oh my God, kids in the candy store. They've got a successful record behind them. Not again that there was any egos, but it was changed.
Yep.
They were still very hard on the sober train. They'd gone through the 12 step or 16 step or however many steps there are.
Yeah.
And they would have their counselors with them. Each guy had a counselor with them. So a lot of times, if there's a decision to be made, they'd go separate rooms with the counselors, talk about it, then we'd have a meeting. So it all became very kind of a little more tense.
Okay.
Also, the whole thing was being filmed, and the first time I'd ever, or the last time either, that it was so strange, and especially back in those days, you know, to video or film anything, the bright lights would come on. Like
Yeah.
none of this low light cameras back then, right? So
Yeah.
that was a bit strange, but you know, after a few days or a few weeks, you'd get used to it and the way it would go. So there's a lot more tension on it, though it was still fun to do. Like, you
Yeah.
know, all the little inserts between the songs, we made those from scratch. None of those are sampled or pulled off the internet. Well, there was no internet then, but you know, we just made well, like in Permanent Vacation, you know, all the whale sounds. We went down to the local marina and got special permissions to go in and run along the pool and record the killer whales and stuff. So
Right.
you know, we make everything, and everything was recorded by us, and we did it all. So that was still in Pump. You know, that
Sure.
was a lot of fun, but there was definitely underlying tensions
Sure.
around.
And it seems like a lot more, or because like you said, the making of Pump documentary is going on. Permanent Vacation had sold 4 or 5 million copies, so it's probably a lot more going on in the studio. I was gonna ask this: was there, because the song "Janie's Got a Gun" had a
Yep.
real controversial message? Was there any talk in the studio about, oh shit, are we really gonna do this, or were people excited about it, or what do you remember about that song?
You know, for us or for me in the studio, I've never really been a lyric guy anyway, so
Sure.
I really listen to the lyric. Like we just like, oh, that's a cool part. Oh, I love that riff. Oh, I love
Yeah,
that drum thing. So that was sort of more the focus. But you know, I mean, obviously you hear the lyrics, and
yeah,
you know, with teenage suicide and all that kind of stuff it's always, you know, a terrible thing,
yeah,
and anything you can do to try and alleviate it is great. So I mean, that was, you know, in the background, but you know, in my experience working in the studio and not around the songwriting
yeah,
stage,
yeah.
it doesn't really come into play for me.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure. You mixed the Bad English album in 1989 that
Yeah.
went platinum. You have John Waite, who had a huge solo career, had a big career with the Babies. You have Neil Sean from Journey. Like, what is, and I don't, maybe those guys were the best of friends, who knows? Or maybe they were just put together because you're like, hey, our former projects weren't doing that well. So, what do you remember about working with those guys? And was it pleasant? Was it stressful? Like that album did end up going platinum, I think.
Yeah, it did. Yeah. Um, well, I remember it all being great at the time. And funny enough, the manager that I had at the time, I got when I started doing the Whitesnake record because he managed Mike Stone, and I was still assisting on it or tape op.
Yep.
And Mike Stone said to the or manager, this Rick Alberti, he says, "Oh, he says you gotta you gotta handle Mike." And I'm like, "Well, I don't need a manager. I'm only an assistant engineer." Anyways, he became my manager.
Sure.
So he was managing a guy named Richie Zito. Richie Zito. Uh, was a great guitar player in his day, and so he was now producing this. So he had put this thing together, recorded it all, and said, "Oh man, we need a mixer." And so Rick said, "Hey, well, give Mike a shot." So I went down to LA to mix it for these guys, met them all. Definitely was in awe because when I was growing up, Journey was like one of my wow, man. I
Yeah.
wanna do that. I want to sound like that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it was great. They were all awesome, awesome people to work with. It was a lot of fun. And it just became a magical thing. Like the songs were great. It was recorded great. Mixing, I wouldn't say it was easy, but it was easy. Like everything just seemed to sort of sift and come together and sound great. So that was a really cool record to do.
When you say like the mixing wasn't easy, and this brings up this, like, how long does it usually take when they go, okay, Mike, it's your turn to put it all? Like, how long does that take you? And can you kind of just maybe briefly go through the process?
Sure, sure. Yeah, it usually takes you about a day a song to mix. I'll come in the morning, I'll throw up all the faders, especially songs I haven't heard or I haven't recorded myself and I don't know. So it takes me an hour or so to sort of sift through. Sometime, well, back in the day, we could sort of have 48 tracks maximum when we're on the 24 track machines. Nowadays, that we're in Pro Tools, unlimited tracks. Sometimes it's 120 or 130 tracks you have to sift through and just see what's there and then see where the song wants it to go. And then you sort of dive in. I like to try and get the drum sounding a certain way. I'll add the bass guitar, some rhythm guitar, and then just kind of build it. Try and get the vocal in pretty quick because everything's going to revolve around the vocal. What
Huh?
needs to be. So that's sort of the process. It usually takes me about a day to get it to where I think, yeah, this is sounding pretty good. And then I get the band to come in, or if they're overseas, send them an MP3 or something of the song and say, "Hey, what do you guys think? You like this? Oh, that sounds great. Can we have some more delay in the vocal on this bit? I wanted, there'll be a couple little tweaks, and then the mix
Huh.
is kind of done." So, but back in those days, you'd have to have the band come in
Yeah.
and into the studio, and they'd sit and listen and do their little comments and all that. Because if they were across the country, you'd have to burn a CD, FedEx it,
Yeah.
wait for it to get there, wait for them to come back. So it was it wasn't as easy to do. So you kind of tended to have to go to mix where the band was, which wasn't always the best because sometimes you can't find the best studios. Like
Yeah.
say if the band was from North Dakota. What studios are here? Well, we don't have this and we have that, and it's like, well, I can't do that there. So yeah, they were all there, and
Sure. It is like obviously it's gotten, like you said, Pro Tools and analog versus digital.
yeah.
Like do you miss the old days, or are you like, oh shit, this makes it so much easier? Like what do you feel about the change?
Well, you look back on it and you always have fond memories. Personally, I do believe for rock music, anyways, analog sounds so much better. There's a
Yep.
warmthness, there's a punch to it, there's a clarity to it. Um, Somebody told me once sort of the difference between analog and digital sound is sort of like between the old light bulb, the incandescent or whatever light bulb, and the neon tube. The neon tube is digital. So it's a gas light. And what it's doing is it's flickering thousands of times a second. And that's why it seems harsh to you. You don't see the flicker, but it seems harsh. Well, that's what digital's doing to your ears. It's flickering between 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1, and it's sounding harsh, whereas analog is not doing that. So that's sort
Yeah.
of the main thing.
Okay.
But we kind of look back at it with a lot of nostalgia, saying, "Oh yeah, analog, so much better back then." So occasionally we go, "Well, let's do an analog record." We'll dust off the old tape machines and we go, "Oh right, I remember why we got digital now."
Right.
Now, if we want to change something, we just have to undo record, and it's back to what it was on analog. Once you're in record, it's gone,
Yeah.
it's done,
Sure.
and then limited to 24 tracks. If you chain two machines, you got 48 tracks.
Right.
With Pro Tools, you have unlimited things.
Yeah.
Though that creates a problem that a lot of people go, we'll decide later, or we'll let the mixer decide, or whatever. Instead of like on analog, you had to commit and say, is that good enough? I can do better. Well, then do it. And you would make it good,
Sure.
whereas before you'd have all these, now you have all these playlists. Okay, well, that's not good. We got another one on playlist 10. Check that one out. It's like, okay, we're going to be 4 days mixing this song if we
Yeah.
have to do that,
Right.
Yeah.
We talked a little bit about John Sykes. So you get called in to mix the Blue Murder album. I just
Mhm.
interviewed Carmine Appice.
Okay.
Put that out probably 4 or 5 days ago. And
Yep.
he said he would have bet his house that that album was going to blow up and sell 2 million copies.
Yep.
So
Yep.
what do you remember about that? And did you feel the same? I mean, did you feel like, oh, geez, this is the one?
That was one of the most fun and intense records I think I've ever worked on. We recorded all the basics at Little Mountain, and it was just a three-piece band.
Yeah.
Such a big sound for a three-piece band. But you got Carmine, you got John, and Tony Franklin on bass. It was just like it was amazing. We had so much fun doing it. Uh, I remember in that record, John was trying to find a singer for it. Uh, I know he tried to get Glenn Hughes, and oh God, I can't remember the list of people. Nobody was available or couldn't. And then I remember at some point all these demo tapes, even on cassettes, were coming in of these singers. And there's this one kid. He's like I felt for him, but he was like 12 years old singing along to an Iron Maiden song. We're like,
Right.
oh, man, great try, kid, but not the thing. So
Yeah.
finally got sick of that. Says, okay, well, I'll just sing it then. And at that point, we didn't know John really sang. He sang background and Thin Lizzy and all that kind of stuff, but see a singer. So he started singing it, and I went down to LA and we did all the vocals down there. I'm like, John, it's amazing. So we did this record. But yeah, when we were done, we had one of the biggest rock labels, Geffen, behind it. John Kalodner was behind it. A lot of track record, a lot of selling records. And it came out, and I don't know what happened. It just didn't happen. But what's funny, Anthony, is like over the years after that, and maybe not so much now, but I remember anywhere you would go, any town, little town, whatever, you go into a bar to have a drink, they'd have a jukebox. It was always cranking out Blue Murder. Like
Yeah.
so many people loved that record. It's like, well, where were you with the sales? Like
Right. Um,
Arr.
Carmine said, and I said, well, what do you think happened? He said we didn't have strong management. Apparently they changed managers or something. And he said the band pushed for the wrong single to be pushed, the single that they were going to really go hard after. Anyway, like he had his theories.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
but agreed. I mean, I talked to so many people that love this kind of music, and everybody's like, what happened with the Blue Murder album? Um,
yeah,
was Ray Gillen sang in Badlands, but I
yeah.
think he did a demo. Was he ever part of that when you were?
Nope, but he was probably on John's list to sing, and maybe he got close. I don't remember.
Sure. Okay.
But I just know that there's a lot of big, big names for vocalists.
Right.
I don't believe David Coverdale was one of them, but
Sure.
there's a lot of big
Yeah.
names. They were like, wow, that'd be cool. Yeah, Ian Gillan and Glenn Hughes. I thought Glenn was awesome. I still do, but
Yeah.
yeah, never came to fruition.
At what point do you start like you were mainly mixing? At what point do you start doing engineer work and then you do start producing? I
Mhm.
think mainly you do engineering and mixing, but when do you start doing the engineering instead of just mixing?
Well, producing is a bit of a funny one for me, and it's only sort of happened because of being years and years in the studio and around people like Bruce Fairbairn and Bob Rock and Mike Stone and Brendan O'Brien and all these people. I'm not musical, as I said.
Sure.
I was not going to make any money playing guitar.
Yeah.
I've sort of tried writing music, and it's just yes, it's just
Sure.
not in my soul. And I believe a really good producer needs that background. Whether or not they can play, okay, they need some musical background where they can come in that and say to a band, "Hey, this chorus isn't happening, so why don't we do and do that and let's write another chorus, or hey, let's rewrite the vocal melody in that and why don't you try singing that?" I can't do that. So I don't call myself a producer. I can go in with a band that's got all their musical thing together. I
Yep.
can sit them, in a room in a rehearsal and do some pre-production saying, now we got to get rid of the double chorus there. The song's got to, and help them with song structure and all that. But as far as writing, no. So I don't really call myself a producer. So
Okay.
some of the stuff I produce, the band has to have sort of their musical side together,
Sure.
so
Sure.
that's why I don't produce a lot. Though I've had a lot of guys in bands say, "Yeah, but you are musical because listen to your mixes. You understand and you feel music." So, but that's what I could give in terms
Yeah.
of musically is my feeling of how the song should be.
Sure.
Not you should play a B instead of a D. There, it's like
Yeah. Yeah. You were the engineer and mixer, if I got it right, on the Sonic Temple album from the Cult in
yes,
1989. And it seems to me like if you had two guys who seemed to be really different in a band, it would be Ian Astbury and Billy Duffy. Like, what do you
yeah.
remember about working with those guys?
Yeah, no, that was awesome. Bob and I did that record together, and I was always a big Cult fan. So that was another band that I can't believe it. There's Ian Asbury and Billy Duffy in the same room. This is great. And
Yeah.
we had a lot of fun on that record. And I think some of the big bands, they as songwriters, uh, some of that headbutting or opposite guys make it killer.
Yeah.
Even in Aerosmith, you've got Steven Tyler and Joe Perry, and they butt heads, but they make it killer.
Yeah.
So in this band, in the Cult, Ian Asbury is sort of more of a standard, rock guy. He wanted to be sort of a pop or whatever rock guy. Ian's the alt guy, and he wanted all that underground stuff and all that. So when
Yeah.
those two guys collided, he just come up with this great music that
Yeah.
appeals to a broader sense, I guess, or
Yeah.
because they're each pushing each other and way, I don't know, out of
Yeah.
it comes great things. So that sort of was that record, and it was a
Sure.
lot of fun to do. And just a note for that record, we had done this song called "The River." And back in the day, at Little Mountain, as I said, we did a lot of jingles. We also did a lot of film score. So
Okay.
we did the film score for uh, Full Metal Jacket, right?
Oh,
So
yeah.
in the studio, we had the big, floor to ceiling screen that they would project the film on when they had the string players out and all that stuff, right? So
Yeah.
we did the song called "The River," and it was basically, like the Vietnam War
Yeah.
and all that. So we got the VHS tape of Apocalypse Now, and we just had that running on this thing in the background. Well, when we started tracking the song, we said, "Oh, let's just get real vibey in here." So we went and got all these candles. We must have had a couple hundred candles around the studio, shut off all the lights, had Apocalypse Now going on in the background, all these candles, and the guys and played The River, and it was a 9 or 10 minute song, and I think we played it 4 or 5 times. And oh yeah, that's great. And it never made the record. I don't know why. I
Right.
believe you can find it as a deep B side somewhere, but I
Okay.
have not heard that song since we did it. And at that time nobody was filming or had cameras, so it's all in my head. But man, that was such an awesome time.
Really? Wow. I wonder
Yeah,
if that has ever come out anywhere.
I've heard somebody said, "Oh yeah, yeah, I think it was on the B side of blah blah blah," or it was on
Sure.
or some later reissue
Yeah.
of 2010 cult stuff, or it can be found, I believe.
Sure.
I haven't looked, but it's called The River, and it's
Okay.
freaking awesome for what I remember.
It's awesome.
Anyway, yeah.
In 1990, now AC/DC, The Razor's Edge. If I understand right, you weren't originally even going to be working on that, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it was their brother George Young that
Yeah.
done all the earlier stuff. Was doing it, I believe, in a studio in Ireland somewhere. They had done all the song. The record was pretty much done. They just needed to do lead guitars and vocals. George got sick, or something happened in the family. He couldn't finish the record. So I guess through AC/DC's channels, they said, "Oh well, let's get Bruce Fairbairn to do it. He's got a great track record." So they came and met Bruce in Vancouver.
Yeah.
Decided let's go with Bruce. So they all showed up in Vancouver, and we started doing vocals. And I think one of the first songs we did, it was the wrong key for Brian. It just wasn't sounding right with his voice or whatever. So
Yeah.
they had to change the key of the song, which involves re-recorded the guitars and the bass. So I got all their gear in there, re-recorded it, got the vocal done. Malcolm and Angus liked the sound of the guitars and the bass so much better. We ended up retuning the guitars and bass for all the rest of the record. And I think there's a couple key changes in some of the other songs too, but we
Sure.
ended up redoing all that. And then I think we even recorded 2 songs. And that time Chris Slade was in the band, so Chris flew out and we did a couple of drum tracks. I think it was "Mistress for Christmas" was one song, and song called Love Bomb or something like that, but we did drums and that. But yeah, the record was done. We sort of, in a way, kind of redid it again. So yeah.
Like after Back in Black, it's not, the late 80s weren't, AC/DC was always going to do fine, but they'd maybe go platinum. But that album is the album that brought AC/DC back to the top. I mean,
Yeah. Well, they had that killer song Thunderstruck,
yeah.
so that didn't hurt.
Yeah. Was that a song that you knew, like when you heard it, like, oh shit?
Anthony, I was just gonna say that was another song that was just like, it was okay song. And it's pretty good. And then I gotta say, I remember Bruce going to Angus, says, "Okay, well, we need something for an intro and all that." And Angus, "Oh yeah," he says, "I've been working on something for that." He says, "Here, check this out." So I remember him lighting a cigarette and started roll the tape, and it started playing that. And we're like, "Oh, okay, cool." So it was only supposed to be in the intro. Well, he was still playing through the first verse, and he's still playing through the chorus, and then he says, "Oh, just keep rolling." Okay, cool. So one take, one pass all the way through. Like, wow. And at the end of it, Angus's cigarette ash is like that long,
Yeah.
like, "Oh, that's great." And so Bruce says, "Okay, well, let's do another pass, see what happens." Then I think we're quarter of the way through, and like, "Yep, yeah, no, we've already got it." So that's
Right.
that. So when we're mixing the song, if you listen now, it's through the whole song. We just sort of duck it in spots, but that was one take. So that was a really cool thing. But to me, it was a good song, but it wasn't. There's no way I had any inclination that it would be the anthem that it is today. Like, it is everywhere, every sports stadium,
Oh.
every commercial, even my grandson's hockey team, that's their skate out song. It's just like, it's crazy.
The big sports team in Fargo is the North Dakota State University Bison. They call themselves the Thundering Herd, and Thunderstruck is their themes. Anyway, it's
of course
can't escape that song in Fargo. Anyway,
yeah.
And then you've worked on every AC/DC album since then.
Yeah.
Correct?
Yeah. Funny.
Yeah. So and I'll get. I kind of want to go chronological. So
Sure.
but in 1990 you work with Poison on Flesh and Blood. I think you were the co-producer.
Yep.
And you did some engineering and some mixing.
Yep.
And I love the album Flesh and Blood, but I'll just say this: their Poison's reputation was that they weren't that talented
Mhm.
live. What do
Mhm.
you? And then I'll just ask what you remember about that album, and was it a difficult album to make, or was what do you remember about it?
No, I remember it being a different album for me because there's so much more kind of pop rock, and
Sure,
then a lot of stuff we had done is, I guess, would be more heavier rock
sure,
or whatever. So
yep,
that was a bit different. Um, I've worked with better talented musicians, but
sure,
they were good. They were great.
sure.
I remember Brett saying once to me, he says, "Frage, Kobe Frage." He says, "Frage." He says, "I know I can't sing." He says, "But," he says, "I go out there and give it my all." He says, "My fans don't care." He says, "Just make me sound as good as you can." He says, "And I'm good with that." You know, and I think he does all right. I wouldn't say he can't sing. I've worked with worse singers and I've worked, whatever, but
Right.
and I just love that honesty of hey, I don't pretend, I don't have this big ego saying, yeah, I'm the singer and pushing and blah, blah. Like, I know I can't sing, and I can't sing. Just make me sound good. So that was great. And then the other cool thing was he would get a lot of flack because '80s whatever, and all you uh rock star, you're such drug addicts and that. Well, he was a diabetic, so he
Yeah.
had to shoot insulin like I don't know twice or three times a day. So he had his needle kit out, and everybody, even if he said, "Oh, I'm diabetic," you're like, "Yeah, sure, yeah."
Yeah.
So
Right.
this poor guy, like holding all this baggage of being a diabetic and people thinking you're a junkie, and then oh, you can't sing because you're a junkie. It's just all this stuff. So I really had a soft spot for those guys, and
Okay.
CC was awesome. He's a great maniac. He reminded me of Sam Kinison,
Right.
the hey face, hey, hey man, he'd always have his jokes, and it
Yeah.
was a fun record to do, but you know
Okay.
some records are a little more work than other records.
Sure. Okay. All right. Um, so then I just wanted I love the album Backstreet Symphony by Thunder. You did that overseas, didn't you?
Yeah, we did that. Well, actually, a place outside of London, a place called Milton Keynes. So there's a big old manor house on a big property, supposedly one of the most haunted places in Britain or whatever. And so we went up there for a month and a half, I think it was, and did the record. Had a lot of great time. I learned about and how to play cricket up there on weekend. We'd have weekends off, and we were middle of nowhere, so we
Right.
had cricket bats, and like, oh, it's kind of like baseball. Well, not really, but
Sure.
yeah, that was great. That was with Andy Taylor from Duran Duran produced that. So
Yeah. Oh,
just
wow.
before that record, in anticipation of doing that record together, Andy had me mix one of his solo records just so we could see how we worked together. And
Was that
we
record called Dangerous?
possibly
The Andy
that's
Taylor? Okay.
that's one of the blank spots in my head. I think, yeah,
I might be wrong.
possibly. Yeah,
What was
yeah,
that like working with Andy Taylor? Because he comes from definitely the more pop side of
yeah.
Duran Duran.
But he's a rocker. He loves it. He's one of those great producers to me that can also write, but he gets the bigger picture, and actually sometimes the bigger picture than other producers. Like he sees down the road and airplay and
Sure.
what genre, and yeah, he was a brilliant guy, and always a lot of fun to work with.
Sure.
Yeah,
What was your perspective of grunge coming in? In September of 91, Nirvana starts exploding.
yeah.
And we didn't know, I didn't know at the time that a lot of the bands that we loved, a lot of the bands that you were producing, that would
Mhm.
really impact them. What do you remember about that happening? And what, if you can kind of go through that a little bit.
Well, back in sort of the '80s, like this whole scene in Vancouver was just kicking on. Like the studios were full with these killer bands. We had the Expo '86 was in Vancouver. Every club was full. The strip bars were amazing. Just it was just this big party, party, party. Nothing could go wrong. Everything was golden, golden, golden.
Sure.
It almost was like overnight. Grunge hit. Somebody pulled the plug. The bathtub emptied, and it all slid down to Seattle almost in a weekend. It was so bizarre. It's like, oh, what happened? Bars started shutting down. Just the vibe, just the air got let out of the tires. It was like, wow, bizarre. So, it does affect us because, we're now doing these 80 bands. There's a certain sound in the 80s that completely went to the 90s. So, we had to adjust. Um, not that we chase what's going on in sound,
Right.
but you sort of have to, okay, what's current, what's people liking, and what's the way
Yeah.
you like. So we had to adjust as well, but it never it got back to what it was in the 80s. It,
Yeah.
it just changed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You did an album, and maybe some of these lesser known bands are hard to remember, which is perfectly fine. But you did an album with a band called Southgang. Well, their guitar player, Butch Walker, has gone on to be like a major producer. He's done. Do you remember anything about working with that band and Butch Walker?
I just, to be honest, I don't remember a lot. I remember the name. I
Yep.
remember it was a very, very cool band. And I
Yep.
remember Butch being a pretty awesome guy. And
Sure.
we connected. Uh, yeah, it was easy to work with him. So
Yep.
I guess we had a sort of a, feeling musical connection together. So
Sure.
them
Sure.
being, I remember staying in touch with them for quite a while, but then it's been quite a while now.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Um, we talked about John Sykes. Well, you get to mix the follow-up, which is 4 years later, the Nothing But Trouble album from Blue Murder.
Yep.
And Carmine Appice said this in our interview. He said, or we talked about it, it seemed like the failure of the first album kind of took the momentum out of John Sykes. It takes him 4 years. So what was your perspective? And the band had broken up, so Carmine and Tony Franklin did work on the album, but they weren't part of the band. And I'll be
Yeah.
quiet now, and I'll kind of let you talk about that album.
Yeah. Well, that one, I don't think I did any recording on that one. So that one was just a mixed thing.
Okay.
I
Yep.
think John had done a lot of it in his home studio at the time.
Sure.
And our good friend Nick Green was still involved. He was sort of the keyboard player and stuff. I
Yep.
know that Tony and Carmine had played on it, but it wasn't really Blue Murder. It seemed like it was more like a John Sykes solo record.
Yep.
Amazing guitar player, amazing writer, but
Yep.
it didn't have the same heart and soul. Could have been because we weren't all there together. Bob Rock producing, I think John produced basically himself. It's always tough to wear several hats, being the producer. Oh, now the guitar player. Oh, now I'm the singer.
Yeah.
Sometimes you need that outside influence to call and hone things.
Sure.
So maybe that's what happened, but I don't remember it being as great as the first Blue Metal record for
Yeah.
sure.
Sure.
Yeah.
You were a co-producer, I think, along with Jimmy Page on the Coverdale Page album. This is
Yeah.
1993.
Yeah.
And you got two of the biggest icons in rock. Like, how do you navigate that?
That was a tough one, especially producing Jimmy Page. It's like, yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jimmy, that wasn't quite right. Can we try another one? Just like, it was intimidating for sure, but Jimmy is such an awesome guy, a great gentleman. He made it easier, easy to open up and have an opinion and say, hey, well, how about that? Oh, yeah, okay, well, let's try this. And so after my discomfort, we became a good kind of team, and it worked really good. I think it was the longest record I've ever worked on. I believe it was a year and 2 months or something like that. Like,
Wow.
did maybe 8 weeks up here in Vancouver, just doing bass and drums and stuff. And then at the time, Jimmy and David both lived down in Miami, so we went down to Miami for 9 months.
Yeah.
I tell you, this kid from the rainforest of the Pacific Northwest being in Miami was just like, it was not my jam. It
Right,
was too hot, and
right,
towards the end, I remember it was January, and I'd go out at the hotel. Got in 9 months, you get to know all the locals pretty good, and
yeah,
I'd go wait for my car to go to the studio, and the valet guys would bring it up, and they'd have their big puffy flannel jacket, or not flannel, but those big puffy jackets on. It's only, I don't know, 64 degrees out or something like that. And I'm in my shorts and t-shirt, and I'm like, "You're not from here." I said,
right.
"I'm from Canada." Oh, that big. Right at towards the end, and I think I had flown out the day before or something. Andrew hit Miami, so I
Yeah,
was just missed that one. So
sure.
remember that, but yeah.
Did those guys get along well, or were there arguments? I mean, I'm just like two guys from huge bands. I mean, are they like, no, it's this way, or what do you?
Well, we all got along great.
Yeah,
Miami was a long time because we would come in the morning in or early afternoon, whatever time we started, and then we would decide, okay, well, today, tell you what, oh, David, why don't you put vocals on this one? So we would just sing some vocals for the day. So, say we started at noon or 1 o'clock, we'd be done by 4 in the afternoon. Like we only worked, it was very short days and had weekends off. So, then one day we'd show up, Dave's, oh, not feeling the vocals today. Okay, well, I got some guitars I want to do. So that was sort of, we just sort of swap
sure,
back and forth and keep
sure,
things comfortable for them.
sure. Did you? And this is again, I think I got this from an interview, but did you work on the 1994 Motley Crue album with John Corabi?
You know what? I did. I don't remember why, but I remember being asked by Bob because and Bob did those records with a guy named Randy Staub, another friend of our engineer, and both him and Randy was on something else, maybe a Bon Jovi record or something, and couldn't do it, and they needed some guitars done, so I went down to Tommy's studio in his house to do some guitars with Mick Mars.
Sure,
Then I believe we might have gone to another studio with Karabi, did some vocals. So yeah, I did a week or two helping him record some stuff.
sure,
Another funny enough side story, I remember going to Tommy's one day to meet up with Mick and do some guitars there. And as I pulled in the driveway, Tommy's pacing up and down his driveway, screaming into this phone and just screaming, and he just door slamming and pissed and blah, blah, blah. And like, okay, well, that's kind of weird. But anyways, we did our little thing and didn't see much of Tommy that day, but then heard later that his longtime handyman had gone into their closet or whatever, their vault, and stolen all these tapes and stuff. So that was the beginning of the tape gate or whatever they're
the
called.
Pam Anderson, Tommy Lee sex tape
Yeah,
story.
yeah.
Holy
But this
shit!
guy had been his guy for like 4 years, handyman, keys to the house, like their buddy, and just to go, oh, I could get a couple $100,000. I think I'll just steal this and blackmail you. Like fucking low life, man.
Oh yeah. Oh my God. That's a pretty historical event to be at. Oh my.
Yeah, I always felt a little bit like Forrest Gump. Forrest Gump.
Yeah.
He's always there in the background. Oh, I wonder what that's all about. Oh, anyways, it's like,
Right. Right. Wait, and it doesn't seem like you were there a lot.
no.
But was I don't know, you just said you worked on some guitars for Mick Mars. Were the other guys around, or was the whole band there when you were doing that?
No,
Okay.
obviously Tommy was around a little bit here and there. I remember
Sure.
meeting Pam,
Sure.
not a fellow Canadian. But no, I think at that point everybody let everybody kind of do their
Yeah.
thing. I don't remember anybody really around. Nikki might have been around a bunch when we were doing vocals with John. I don't remember. I remember
Yeah.
John being pretty awesome. He was really enjoyed working with him. He was a
Yeah.
great guy. Kind of sorry that didn't work out for him, but
Totally.
and he's doing awesome in the Dead Daisies now. So
That's right. That's right. Um, so in 1995, you get called back to do AC/DC. And obviously, I mean, after what happened with The Razor's Edge, but you co-produce with Rick Rubin. And Rick Rubin kind of has a reputation for being a different cat. So can you go into a little bit about that album and what
Yeah,
you
that was actually a really tough record to do. They wanted to do it in New York, uh, and I was on another record. Rick had gone out to New York to search studios or whatever, set the band up in this place called the Power Station,
Mhm.
and then started doing the record. And I'm in the middle. I can't remember what I was doing, but I remember getting a phone call from Angus, and he goes, "You need to get out here right now." He says, "Rick's engineer is trying to get me to plug through all these pedals for my guitar. Like they just plug straight into their amp, and that's it." And he says, "They're trying to get me, and it's just you need to get out here right now." So I think I had to stop whatever I was doing and flew out there. So we spent, I think it was 6 weeks there because they had prepaid the studio and the studio wouldn't let them out of the deal. At the power station, it's sort of this big, round, really great ambient sounding room for 80s ambient sounding drums. And AC/DC wanted this close in your face drum, and we just could not get. I remember Rick hiring uh, a circus tent at one point to put around the drums. We put burlap sacks on all the surfaces in the studio. We tried everything to deaden it, and we just couldn't do it. So we did our times 6 weeks, see if there was managed to salvage anything. We pulled the plug, came back to LA, didn't save a thing from New York, and basically started the record again. Now, AC/DC are a band that they like doing it live and fresh.
Yeah,
Like after sort of Malcolm and Angus sort of have the songs written, the band don't even know the songs until almost before we come into the studio. So it's all brand new. They're playing it for the first time, and you get that excitement. So by
yep.
the time we're doing the record again, second time, we're all over it and done it. And so it was a bit tough. Um, Now Rick is a different guy, great guy, got along with him great. He's a great uh, musical guy, but he's sort of more like an A&R guy. He knows what he wants, but doesn't know how to get there.
Sure.
So a lot of times he wasn't at the studio. He would show up later. Like, we'd be there at noon and Rick would show up at 6 or 7 o'clock at night. We'd be there for 6, 7 hours. And I'd be saying to the band, "Hey, well, why don't we throw it down a couple of times? And when Rick comes in, he can check it out." Nope, he's the producer. We don't want to be wasting our energy. If he wants to change anything, we want to be fresh. We don't want to play it a bunch of times. And then, so that was sort of their thing. So it was very difficult. It felt like, just pulling our hair out trying to get it done. So,
That sounds kind of the opposite of Bruce Fairbairn, because didn't you
yeah,
like Bruce Fairbairn seemed to be like very meticulous, planned out,
yeah, yeah.
and this seems kind of
I thought it was going to be a great record because, Rick's a big AC/DC fan. Like, even when he did some of the cult records, they would sound AC/DC-ish,
right.
So I thought, that's just going to be great. Me and Rick together on this record. And, I don't know if Rick's was is into it at the time
Sure.
or what it was. Like, I know when we came back to LA to do the record, he had kind of started doing a Chili Peppers record, and he was in the other studio, which was sort of rubbing with the band too. It's like, well, are you doing us or them? Or
Yeah.
so it's just a difficult time, but we got her done.
Sure. Sure. Um, you do the Van Halen Balance album in '95, and that's like in the history of Van Halen a pretty stressful time. It's the last album before they broke up, and I know you just mixed it, but what like was there tensions in the studio with the band? Were they there together a lot, or what do you remember about that?
Well, that one I somehow, and I can't remember how it came about, but I hooked up with Eddie and was out at 5150 for 2 or 3 weeks doing a lot of the pre-pro stuff for them. They were writing that record then, and we were
Okay.
working together and hanging out, and it was a great time. And as we got closer to them being finished, and Sam would come in and sing, and everybody was doing great, having a good time. I know Eddie was sober at that time. I know he was drinking the non-alcoholic beer every once in a while, but he was sober and everything was great. Then they said, "Hey, well, we need to find a producer. I said, well, how about Bruce? I said, I've always worked with Bruce. How about Bruce Fairbairn? So I put them together, and great. Okay, awesome. Again, I was in New York doing some other record. Bruce said, oh, we got to get going right now. I said, I can't just stop this thing. So he had some other guy engineer it, and then I mixed it at the end. So I wasn't around for the actual all the recording,
Okay.
but for
Sure.
all the 3 weeks of pre-pro, everybody was all great and cool and everything. And it was maybe after the record came out that all the
Yeah.
stuff came, and I don't know what happened.
There was, and if you don't remember this perfectly, but maybe this came up during pre-production, there was a song that was called "Don't Tell Me What Love Can Do," but originally it was called "Let Me Tell You What Love Can Do," but then they wanted to change it because they thought, oh, we're in the grungy 90s. We can't be talking about love, so it got changed to "Don't Tell Me What Love Can Do." That ended up being controversial. Do you remember that at all? And if you
That
don't,
was that was outside of my pay grade. I wasn't on that meeting.
sure, sure. Okay. All right. Um, and I got a couple more that I want to ask you about, and then you mix the 1995 Vince Neil Carved in Stone album, um, which was, and you had just worked a little bit on the previous Motley Crue album, and this was a huge change from what he was known for. And his daughter had died that year. And maybe, I don't know, at this time, maybe he's not there a lot in the mix, but did you get to work with Vince much? And was that a difficult period for him? I would imagine. But what do you remember about that?
Yeah, he was there a lot. Like, he would come during the day or towards the end of the mix, like most of the artists do, and check it out. Some days we mixed at a place in LA called the Record Plant, so they had a hot tub room. So he would sometimes show up earlier than he was needed, and I'll be in the hot tub room or whatever. So I was like, okay, then. Um, so he was there a lot. Yeah, we had a really good relationship. I do remember, not that we ever talked anything personal about, say, his DUI incident back in the day, or his daughter. Like, none of that came about. But I do remember when we were mixing the record, LA had sort of some unseasonably wet weather, and he had to get rescued out of his place in Malibu by helicopter because it was all roads were flooded and his house was going to get flooded, and he had to come in and get him. So I remember that all happened. Like, oh, where's Vince? How come Vince is? Oh, didn't you hear it? A helicopter had to come and get them, and they're taking them and ferrying things out. And so, yeah, there's some controversy, but he was pretty cool.
Yeah, sure. And then you get to work with Metallica, the
Yeah.
biggest band in the world in '96, and that's maybe a little bit different than the bands you had been working. How do you get pulled into the Metallica fray?
Well, again, that probably came through Bob not being able to do it. But my first thing with them was I was just handed the Binge and Purge box set stuff. So it was I can't remember. It was 5.1 back then, or it was just stereo, but it was a live, to the picture, and there was a CD and all that kind of stuff. So that was sort of my first introduction to the band. Obviously, I had heard the Black album that Bob had done with them.
Yeah.
But I had really heard any older Metallica stuff. So when I'm doing this, I'm like, oh, fuck yeah, I like this song's great. So I really got into some of the older stuff. I love the newer stuff, but some of the older stuff, I'm like, yeah,
Sure.
I see where the fans are coming from. So that was a lot of fun to do. So yeah, that was
Was the band pretty present when you were mixing the Load record?
yeah, well, that one, Bob and Randy were doing a record, and they were gonna do a double record.
Yeah.
And just stretched out so long. They just go, well, let's just do half of it right now and get it out first. So that was Load. So the band wanted to spend time on mixing it. So, like, a day or 3 or more per song to mix it. Well, just logistically have one guy doing that was gonna add another couple of months to it. So they called me out. So And we're virtually right across the road at each other in downtown New York. Randy's in one studio, I'm in another studio. They have the exact same board and gear. And so we just sort of split mixing duties. He says, okay, well, today, how do you want to mix this one? And I'll mix this one. And so we basically it was about a week a song, maybe. But,
Oh,
I can't remember how many songs, 10 songs, 12 songs. So it was basically, 4 weeks, 6 weeks to do it. But that's how we did that one. Reload was a lot similar, but less time. I think it was maybe 2 days a song to mix
okay.
because they kind of had everything done and all that. But yeah,
Metallica obviously wasn't too worried about the budget.
I guess not. They were also finishing. They were still recording while we were mixing to try and speed things up. So that's why it was slow. Some days
Sure.
I would get the tapes and it would only be drums. I'm like, okay, the drums are ready.
Yeah,
Okay, well, we might have a bass guitar to you by tonight or tomorrow.
sure.
Okay, so I got to explore a lot of New York during
Right.
that record. Yeah,
Right. Right.
yeah,
So you end up, we talked about Ball Breaker in 95. You do Stiff Upper Lip in 2000. AC/DC, I'm talking about Black Ice 2008, Rocker Bust in 2014, Power Up in 2020. Like,
yeah.
how has that relationship evolved over those years and those albums from when you started with AC/DC up until Power Up?
Yeah. Well, I think from that first record we did, Razor's Edge, I think we developed this working relationship where I understood the sound they were wanting and craving their instruments to be.
Yeah.
And that was my focus, is to help them, make them happy. So they're a very loyal band. A lot of the road crew have been, lifers. They're basically surrounded by family.
Yeah.
And that's why Stevie's playing guitar, and after Mal had to leave because he's physically family, but all of us are family. We all act like family. There's that camaraderie. Even if I don't see them for 5 years, I don't know, and they're comfortable in that kind of situation. They don't like to have to sort of reteach people or have people saying, "Oh yeah, on this one, why don't you plug your guitar into this Fender amp, and we can get a really." No, this is what I do. This is how I want the sound. He doesn't want to explain it. He just wants to step into the studio, plug in, and go. And then, I hope you recorded that because we're only playing it once. Not that they have any ego, but that's sort of the expectation. And so everybody that surrounds them works that way,
Sure.
make sure everything's ready to go when they're there and ready to play. Then let's play, record it. Okay, we got it. We're done, and that's worked over the years. And I think that's why I'm sort of been stuck around with them.
They just got done playing some shows. I mean, none of us are getting any younger. Do you think we're going to hear anything from AC/DC again, or is
That's I don't know. When Mal got sick and we had to do that record without him, that was sad and funny because Malcolm was such a big he was the band, to be honest. The heart and soul, both him and Angus, but Mal in particular because of his rhythm, and he just and then when he passed away, I couldn't imagine them doing another record after that, which we did. And then we've done another record. If Angus has still got it and still got the thing to do, I say, yeah, man, go for it.
Yeah.
I just never thought it would go this far
Yeah.
without Malcolm. But, hey, good to Angus for carrying the torch.
Yeah. I don't know, this off topic, but how does a guy like Brian Johnson still sing like that at his age? I mean, if I tried that for a minute, my vocals would be shredded.
Yeah, yeah. I feel for both him and Angus, getting up there, especially with Brian, because I know over the years when we've done vocals with him, and even here in Vancouver, sometimes we'll send him to a vocal coach just to try and get some more longevity, because it's hard to when you think that they're out playing on the stage every night or every other night,
Yeah.
for 2.5 hours, 3 hours. That's one thing. But now you're in the studio for 6 or 7 hours singing straight. It's hard to things start going, and then you got to take 3 days off in the studio time. But so we sent it to vocal coaches, and he sings absolutely wrong. Like he scrunches where they're supposed to open it all up, but that's his sound, and that's how he does it. And God bless him. But now even at his age, and Angus's age, now they're running around on stage for 3.5 hours and doing all that stuff. When I was in my early 30s, I couldn't do that.
No.
Let alone 70 or whatever it is now. Like, my God.
Right.
So power to him,
Right. So we talked about, you did this album, Still Believe in Rock and Roll by The Wild. Love that album. The song Gasoline is my favorite song of the last year. What other projects are you working a lot? I know you have a website, and it's MikeFraserMix.com, and people can try to work with you to get you to mix. So what are you up to now?
Oh yeah. I've kind of slowed down a lot. I've always wanted to take summers off. I got a cabin way up in the bush, and I used to work well in the 90s or whatever. All the bands are out touring in the summer. Summers were kind of dead. I'd go away. It's almost opposite now. Summers just get crazy busy.
Okay.
And then winters are dead. And I'm, here in sort of rainy, snowy Vancouver, and I'm like, let's go into the studio. So things have changed a bit. Also streaming has changed a lot of things. There's not the money in, say, rock music anymore. I mean, rock will never die, but they're making the money sort of live and touring now. There is no such thing as sales anymore, and it's streaming. And then the streaming companies are all strangled the artists and paying them mere pennies of what they should be getting. So the money's not there. So to hire me plus a studio, because I don't own a studio, I don't mix in a box, is difficult. So it's slowed down a lot. But I'm kind of happy that it's slowing down now. Not that it's forced retirement, but it is a little bit. And I'm going, I'm fine with not being as busy and being a little more choosy, or I try and help out a lot of the smaller bands when I can. When they can afford it. I've got some remote gear that I can go into rehearsal studios and stuff and record them and all that. So I dabble a little bit in that, and I just kind of wait till the phone rings or whatever. But I'm quite happy to be hanging with my dog.
So if there are bands out there that want your services, they can just go to Mike Fraser Mix.
Heck yeah. I answer everything. I no longer have management or anything. It's just me. So I answer everything. I do whatever I can to try and work within their budgets, because I realize budgets aren't what they were. And, for me, it's not about money anyways. It never has been. It's about, great music and trying to help that being done. Yeah.
Sure. I just got a couple the random questions, and then we'll finish it up if that's okay.
Sure, yeah. Somebody wants to say here. Hi.
Oh, and shoot, my dog's over here on the couch. Charlie's over there.
Hi, Charlie.
Laying down.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Sorry. No, that's okay. Charlie is actually in my theme music that gets played. She interrupts a lot of videos. She's kind of got a name on YouTube anyway.
Oh, nice.
So here's a couple random questions that I thought. What's your favorite couple records that you worked on that if you look back, you go, man, these are the two that I would tell people about the most?
Well, there's this one band called the Dan Reed Network. They're a band out of Portland, Oregon.
Yeah.
And I can't remember what year that was, probably 88, maybe.
They had 88 and 91. I think you worked on two of the albums.
Yeah. So that was a lot of fun. It was a different thing. They had a lot of funk to it.
Yeah.
But had a rock thing, and I remember they had, Bruce Fairbairn produced a guy named Derek Schulman was the A&R guy. What was the name of that company then? Not Chrysalis, maybe Chrysalis. Anyways, they were a huge label before Geffen sort of took over from that.
Yep.
And it just seemed like all the stars were aligning, and it was one of those records. You go, this can't fail, and it's just this new music and all that. And it came out. It did okay, but not great because it was too funky for the rock people, and it was too
Yeah.
rocky for the funk people. So it
Yeah.
kind of did that. Virtually, I think it was 8 months later, Living Color came out and exploded. It's just like so. It's, a lot of time, it's timing.
That
But boy,
91,
yeah,
oh, I'm sorry.
yeah. Go ahead. I was
That
just
that
gonna.
91 album I've heard, and it was a year too early.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Anyway.
yeah. It was fun, but boy, was it a fun record to do. Just experiment, and then I remember at the end of it, I think we had done all the mixing and all that, and then Dan says, "Hey, can we do some well, what we'd call, I guess, at that time, dance mixes or dub mixes or extended mixes. So we take
Yeah.
a 4 minute song and make it, 12 minutes long. So we
Sure.
started doing that to some of the songs. So we stayed up. The only drugs we had was caffeine and nicotine. 6 days straight.
What?
We never left the studio for 6 days straight. And the first day and a half or 2 days was just like, oh my God. But you get so creative and so into doing this thing that it became this dreamscape. And then so you'd walk out to go to the washroom, it'd be like daylight, and all the studio day staff would be there. And like, oh, okay, great. And then the next time you'd walk out, it'd be midnight and dark. And so the concept of time disappeared, and we're just immersed in this creative thing. So I remember after 6 days, we'd finished, I think it was 3 songs that we wanted to do. And then I had an hour drive to get home. I remember coming out, and it was a nice sunny warm day. And then Dan and I says, hey, let's see how long we can stay up for after this, right? So I'm halfway driving home, and I'm starting to get the nausea. And I'm like, holy shit, I'm going to fall asleep or whatever, right? So finally make her home. And then I thought, I'll probably sleep for 2 days straight. 6 hours, wake, like nothing had happened. So
Are you
great
sure there wasn't
experience.
something else in that nicotine or?
I know I mean, there's nothing, but it was a great experience. But I would never want to stay up six
Yeah.
days straight again. I've
No.
been there, done that, and especially now my age, like I can't even stay awake past 9 o'clock at night. I'm looking
Right.
at the time. Yeah.
Right. What was the most difficult record that you worked on, if you can say?
Yeah. Well, I've been pretty blessed to work with a lot of really cool people, and they've all been great. Like some people say that Lars out of Metallica is really difficult. I never had a problem with him. He wants what he wants,
Yep.
and for a reason, but that's
Sure.
why I'm there. A lot of people say David Coverdale is difficult. There's been a few people that have supposedly been things. No, but in every record, there's rubs and everything. So I've had a pretty good lucky go at it.
Right.
I wouldn't say there's one that stands out that
Sure. Sure.
I would hate.
Did you ever get done with a record and go, shit, I should have done something different?
Every single one of them. No, no, it's funny, like after I'm done working on a record, it takes me, God, at least a year, maybe 2 years, but before I even want to hear it again.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even when it starts coming on the radio or whatever, you're like, oh yeah.
Yeah.
Because you still hear the mistakes. Oh, I wish I would have done that. And oh,
Yeah.
why did I do it that way? And yeah.
I think you've answered this. I was going to ask what were the records that didn't do well that surprised you, but I think you answered that with Blue Murder and
Blue
Dan
Dan
Reed.
Reed. Yeah.
Yeah.
Even the Wild, they did okay. They did huge. It started to get really huge over in Europe. Then COVID happened.
Yeah.
They had a whole year tour booked, and each one shut down. And then when that was kind of over, I know we talked to the label about, hey, let's re-release the record. They said, well, to do that, we need, 3 more songs. They said, okay, let's do it. So, well, we're not paying for the 3 more songs. And then that just kind of, I don't think they're doing any. They do a couple little gigs here and there, but they're kind of done, which is
Yeah. It seemed
terrible.
like that
Great band.
took the wind out of their sails. I've actually written their Facebook page because I'm like, hey, I'll get somebody to come on. I have a Saturday night radio show on Rock 101 KLOL. I'll promote this interview on there.
Yep.
But I played their music there. I'm trying to get somebody to come on and promote them anyway.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I'll send Dylan your info or whatever to introduce you guys in an email or whatever because
It'd
he's
be great.
awesome. I don't think they're doing anything. You know, they all got day jobs now, and
Sure.
it
Sure.
really definitely kicked the wind out of their sails because we worked so hard for so many years, and it's finally starting to happen. And then this
Yeah.
stupid COVID just
Yep.
was
Right.
terrible. Yeah.
Were there any records that surprised you with how well they did? Like you got done and you're like, oh, and you're like, holy shit, that became a hit.
I know. Well, like I said, Thunderstruck, surprised that it's right up there with, you know, Back in Black and Highway to Hell. It's
Yeah.
like one of the iconic songs. It's like, wow, I never saw that one coming.
Sure.
I mean, it was a good
Sure.
song, great band, but never saw that coming.
Yeah.
You know, and for me, like a lot of the early success, you know, the AC/DC or the Aerosmiths and all that kind of stuff. Loverboy, like, you know,
Yeah.
to be go from wow, I was just in the studio with him and what that's selling, you know, millions of copies, and
Yeah.
it just kind of blows your mind.
Yeah.
Bit for sure. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, your career is amazing, and it's like you were there when
Mhm.
some of my favorite bands kind of came back from the brink, Aerosmith, AC/DC, and you've worked on some of my favorite albums of all time. I can't thank you enough for coming on and sharing all these stories.
Man, it's been a lot of fun, and you know, we could go for another hour and a half or two. It'd be
I
easy
could
to
have. I
hear
could
chat.
have.
Good thing
So,
we're opposite ends of the country, man, or we'd be just, you know.
right, right. And hey, maybe we'll have to do a part two sometime, but hey,
Yeah.
go check out MikeFraserMix.com. And man, you've been so gracious. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anthony. It's been a pleasure talking to you, man, and thanks for being such a rock fan. You know, you help make the world go around and get those fans excited about the music that we do. So thank you so much.
Yep, yep. I'll let you know when this comes out, and I'll stay in touch. And just thanks again.
Sounds good, brother.